Welcome to the Sabbath Life Podcast. This is a space where we share stories about the Abbey of the Heights and the Christian contemplative tradition and rhythms of life that make us more human and friends with time. I'm Peter White. I'm one of the hosts of the Abbey of the Heights, a Christian retreat space here in Tulsa, Oklahoma. And today I'm joined by my friend Garland Tackett. Garland, do you want to share a little bit about who you are and the ministry work that you're involved in and your connection to the Abbey and how you first found yourself here?
I'd love to. I'm originally from Memphis, Tennessee, and I moved here to Tulsa in the late 1990s. My father and I had a business that we sold to an outfit here in Tulsa. I am an engineer by education, and I've always been involved in construction of some sort or other, either with a company that I had or with the energy business. That's kind of what I got in here in Tulsa. I've just recently retired. But about 10 years ago, I really began on this really a spiritual journey. I would call it a midlife crisis, kind of in my late 40s and early 50s. And even though I had grown up in the church, I was raised Southern Baptist, it just wasn't working for me. And I had questions that I really didn't have super answers for. And so I started trying to find answers. I've always been fascinated on how things work, including how people work. And my first subject was me. How do I work? And I began to get exposed to a lot of different types of tools that I really had never been around. And I learned a lot about myself, not all positive, but I learned some about myself. And then it just, because of my spiritual interest and curiosity, I had a difficult time not joining those two. So I don't know, about 7 years ago, I learned about spiritual direction. In fact, you and I sat together for a while there. You were my spiritual director. But you and I have now known each other for quite some time. And in fact, I became interested in spiritual direction and not knowing whether that was something I wanted to become a spiritual director, but I certainly was interested in this conversation, this spiritual conversation that went away from a hierarchical, I'm the expert and you sit at my feet and learn, to more of this journeying together. And the more I looked into that, I said, is that something I'd like to do? So I ended up going, before you formed your school, I ended up going to Chicago, Illinois for a 2-year program to kind of go through a spiritual direction training. So I've been through that. Would I call myself a spiritual director? Yes. Do I do that full time? No. It's kind of become more of what I do within the local church that my wife and I have been a part of. So I don't know, to kind of land the plane on this a little bit, my wife and I, since we've been in Tulsa, we've been a part of a church here in Tulsa called Redeemer Covenant Church. Most people call it Redeemer now. And we've been a part of that for 30 years. And after I had finished my training, I went to our lead pastor and said, I'm interested in using what I have learned within this body, within this community that I've been a part of for 30 years. And so we started going down that path. And that's what we're doing now. We are involved in this term spiritual formation that I grew up, around discipleship, but this spiritual formation, not only my own, but the formation of others, has kind of become a little bit of a passion for me. And it's what I plan to do, is just to talk to people about their spiritual journey. I find it's a never ending conversation, because everyone is different and everyone has a different story. And so I just love listening to people's stories. So I don't know, that's probably as succinct. I could certainly go on and on about all that I've learned about myself and about this idea of having a conversation with someone, but I find it energizing and exciting.
I love all of that about your story, Garland. And I love that aspect of you took that interest in engineering and how things work, and then apply that to yourself in your own spiritual life.
But the real difference for me, just one more thing on that, is that so much of my faith was in my head. And I confused knowing things about Jesus to knowing Jesus. And I would have told you I had a personal relationship with Jesus. I would have used all the churchy words. But it's really much later in my life to realize I had a head knowledge of Jesus, but I didn't have a heart knowledge of him. And that's probably the biggest change in my life, even over the last 5 years.
Now, if I remember right, so in your story, you have worked at the church that you are part of while also working outside of the church while attending this church. So being both outside and inside. Tell us a little bit about what that journey has been like for you of working both for the church, but also outside the church.
Yeah, it's been an interesting journey. We love this church. We love the people within it, the community within it. And as I have grown older, I've begun to see more and more that the institution of the church, although in a great way for someone to enter into their spiritual life, it actually can become a deterrent of some sort. And the structure and the rules and the policies, and sometimes even the doctrine and the theology can become a deterrent to actually having a relationship with God. And so what I have found is that as I've begun to introduce some of these topics around spiritual formation, there's oftentimes, particularly within evangelical communities, a resistance to that. In fact, I was listening to one of your previous podcasts, and I forget the name of the woman who was in Oklahoma City, but she was talking about a little bit. She's at a much larger church than what Redeemer is, but it seemed as though she was talking about that resistance sometimes that evangelicals can have to this whole idea of spiritual formation. So what I like to say is that, and what I've come to believe is that God is at work. And before, I think church for me was about programs. It was about, you get this curriculum, you have an 8-week study on 2 Timothy or whatever, on Esther, whatever it is, and how many people can we get to sign up for those? And the real success or marker of success is that we've had a bunch of people sign up for this 6-week, 8-week, 12-week study or whatever it is, and we hand out the curriculum. You have an instructor at the front of the class, and he or she is the expert, and you got to fill in the blank, and there's a lot of discussion around what did you get for question number 6. But oftentimes there becomes this barrier to intimacy with God. And even though, again, we're coming back to our head knowledge, what is it about a heart knowledge? So what I have found is that God is at work. And it's a matter of listening to people's story. It's back, instead of, here I have this curriculum that is suited for everyone, why don't I go and talk to this person and listen to their story and find out, well, tell me a little bit about your relationship with God. And within that story, you will learn how God is at work. And what is their resistance? What is their resonance to that? How are they drawn to it? How do they feel apart? And then to begin a conversation around that. And so I'm much more interested in small. My wife and I, there's a curriculum that we brought to our church, and it basically involves 8 people sitting in a living room. And Peter, this is what I want to do. I really don't want to teach Sunday school anymore. I don't want to stand up in front of a group of 300 people. I want to sit in my living room with 6 to 8 people and really get to know each other and hear people's story and find out how God is working in their lives.
That's a really beautiful comment. I really like that. Yeah. So tell us some of your story, Garland, in terms of like how, I know that you came to the Abbey, you stayed here a couple of nights, and you were in a season of trying to figure out what the next step was for you.
Yes.
And if I'm remembering this story, like you were trying to decide whether or not to step back into church work.
That's exactly right.
You're right. So share some about your experience here at the Abbey and what happened in those couple of days for you.
Well, this whole issue of discernment has become, what is spiritual discernment? But through my reading and through my training, Ignatian spirituality has been a big influence on me. I've heard and read that a lot of evangelicals are attracted to Ignatian spirituality because if they have a Protestant background and this whole Catholic thing, whatever their story they heard in their youth about the Catholics, and all of a sudden Ignatian spirituality can be an entryway. And that's true for me too. So this issue of discernment, this idea, again, back to seeing how God moves in your life. So as part of the training that I did in Chicago, at the very end of it, we were required to do a 3-day silent retreat. And it was similar to your program. It was a cohort. We would go back and forth between Chicago, but I could do my spiritual retreat anywhere. And obviously I knew you at the time. The Abbey was open, and it was just a natural place to come and do my 3-day silent retreat. And it was such an interesting experience. I won't go into a tremendous amount of detail, but I think I at least ought to speak to what my experience was, particularly in this issue of discernment, about what was I supposed to do. So I show up on a Friday around noon, and I took off my watch, and I think, Peter, that was the first time since I was probably, I don't know, 16 years old. Whenever I got my first watch, whenever time and keeping time being on time became important, I
Mm.
took off my watch, and I can't begin to tell you the feeling that it was a euphoric feeling of, I have nowhere to be. I have nothing to accomplish. And I was upstairs in one of the rooms. I know you got 4 rooms upstairs. And I was in one of the rooms with, a bathroom, a private bathroom and shower. And so I love that space to just sit there. You know what? I ended up taking a nap, and it was like 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and I just laid down, and there was this, I don't know, it was an experience like I'd never had before in my life, when schedule and time and productivity it was a marker of value. What did you get done today? So then the next day was really incredible. I woke up, I had had a little bit of a structure to it, some exercises I was going to do, but it was interesting, Peter. I woke up, and all of a sudden I began depression. I don't know if it was depression or if it was a sadness or it was I don't know, it was a little blue. It wasn't a hopeless kind of situation, but I will tell you, it is something I'm not sure I've ever felt in my life. And I know you love the Enneagram, and I'm pretty sure I'm a 7 on the Enneagram. And so I don't like to look at pain. And I am about convinced. Well, actually, we got to the end of that, and that was on a Saturday. And Saturday afternoon, I don't know if you remember or not, I sat with you. You offered spiritual direction within that time period, and I knew that it was in my best interest to do that, and to sit down and talk with someone. And you and I had a great discussion about what's going on in my body. That am I Am I just distracting myself with so much around me? There is something within me that needs to come to the surface. And I think it did on that Saturday morning. And it was something that I had never really experienced before. And it wasn't like I was scared, or it wasn't that. It was just so radically different. And I just don't believe I could have experienced that except for having the first step of taking off my watch, of not
Mm.
necessarily having something to do. And so after I did that, I spent the night Saturday night. I woke up Sunday morning, and it was just, I don't know. And I have come back again. I haven't done 3-day retreat, but I was in the middle of making some decisions. And I need to just go spend a day at the Abbey. I need to unplug. I need to take off my watch. I need to not to be in a hurry, and I need to spend some time with God. And I need to sense, what is it that He's communicating with me. So those are the two. Personally, that's the way I have experienced the Abbey, and what a resource it's been to me.
There were two things particularly that you just mentioned that
Okay.
stood out to me. And one was like taking off your watch and the experience of experiencing time differently. That
Yes.
we get into this routine of like, every 5 minutes, every 20 minutes, every like just the count of time through our days of minutes and seconds and hours that we live by to be productive. And are we getting the most out of all of our time? And
Yes.
what's it like to, even just that physical ritual of taking off the watch and
Yes.
how that affects our experience of time.
Yes.
That just strikes me as significant and really
Agreed.
interesting. And then the other thing you mentioned was the having the experience of sadness, or maybe it's just unpleasant feelings that came to the
Yes.
surface on your retreat. I don't think that's an uncommon experience for people, and maybe even an obstacle for some people of we just keep ourselves busy all the time because we don't want
Right.
to have to deal with those feelings.
Right.
If I
That
stopped,
pretty much sums up my life.
if I actually stopped and paid attention to my life, I might have to address some hard things.
What it's allowed me to do is, when I've had that same feeling, and I have, when I've
Yeah.
had that same feeling and I'm not in retreat, I'm paying attention to it. It's like, okay, let's sit with this for just a little. Maybe it's 5 minutes. Maybe it's not 24 hours or 48 hours, but could we
Mm,
sit with this feeling for just a minute and have a conversation with God about it? That's the missing piece for me,
mm,
to sit there and say, oh, I'm going to kind of dwell on these emotions, all good, well and good, or even in my thoughts, but to turn and say, can I go to Jesus and have a conversation with him about this. What's going on? Can we talk about this? I'm
Mhm.
scared. I'm confused. What's going on? And then honestly to sit and say, how does he respond to that? How do I sense Jesus responding to me in this moment when I'm feeling very something specific around a very moment by moment daily event that's taking place?
That has me just thinking about, do you think that by the opportunity to experience these feelings in a safe place like the Abbey on a retreat and having the experience of like, that didn't kill me. I could feel those
Yes.
feelings and talk about them with God and process them and then they go away. That then as we feel them outside of our retreat space, just in our day-to-day life at home, at work,
Yes.
that we're like, oh, this isn't going to kill me. What is this feeling trying to say to
Right.
me right now? And what does God want to show me as a result of this?
Exactly. That's exactly it. That's exactly it. I think, well said. That's definitely what I was trying to communicate. Yeah.
I find a lot of people, especially younger people, when they come here for a retreat, well, first of all, they're like 3 days of quiet. Like I can't imagine an hour of quiet.
Right.
And they're like, I don't know what to do. What am I supposed to do? And
Yeah.
So there's such a gift in it, I think.
Yeah.
Um,
You've probably heard it. Well, James Finley is a fellow that I'm a big fan of. And he has this deal where he takes that, be still and know that I'm God. Be still and know. Be still and be. It's that whole idea of we're really human doings, not human beings. We ever striving for that accomplishment. But what does it mean just to be? Just to be. Yeah.
well, so you had that personal experience here
Yes.
at the Abbey, and you have over the last couple of years brought some groups to the Abbey as well through your church.
Yes.
Say some about what you mentioned that curriculum earlier.
Yeah.
So what do you want them to experience when they come here, and what are they experiencing?
Sure. No, I'd love to talk about that. You have such an incredible space. I love those 2 front rooms. You have that one gatherings place. It's good. So I like to, again, whether it's in my living room or at the Abbey, I really don't want to do more than 10 people. Even 10 sometimes feels like it's pushing it. But I love to bring a small group of people, sit in that little space with the couch and chairs. And then you've got that other little prayer space with the cubicles, I call them. You may call them something else, a chance for folks. So those 2 front rooms are great. And obviously your kitchen, and then that beautiful back sunroom that you have with that bookshelf and those beautiful windows and that couch and a place to sit. I just love the downstairs and how it's laid out. And so it's just been great for bringing groups to that. So the curriculum we do, when I was working at the church, my title at that time was Pastor of Spiritual Formation. And I knew that I didn't want to just be duplicating back to let's do another Bible study on Second Peter or one of the God, whatever. I knew I wanted to get away from that. And I began to look for different curriculum. And honestly, there's not a huge amount of curriculum out there. Coming out of my spiritual direction training, I was a little bit better equipped to look at some curriculum and evaluate, is this going to accomplish what I want? I ended up talking to a church in California, and they put me in touch with an organization called Vantage Point 3, and they're out of South Dakota. They've been around for 25 years. It was founded by a gentleman by the name of Randy Reese, who is no longer living, but it's head up by a guy named Rob Lone right now. And they've, like I said, been around 25 years. They have a 3-year program. Now, you tell about a 3-year curriculum, I can get excited about that because some people are going to be drawn to that and others are going to I just don't have time for that. And that's okay. But it's back to seeing where people are at work, how God is at work in people's lives. And so this curriculum, I could go on and on about it, but just suffice to say, it's just an incredible curriculum for spiritual formation. In fact, one of the things that put me over the edge with Vantage Point 3 is that you get this box of curriculum and there's books to read and there's things like this, but you also get a book that is not for you. As a participant, you take this book and you hand it to someone else and you say, I want you to be my spiritual mentor. And I need you to read this book And while I am going through this curriculum, part of my obligation is that you and I need to get together at least once a month. And honestly, it's all about me. I need you to ask me, how's it going? What am I experiencing? How do I see God showing up? Well, it's interesting, Peter. It's spiritual direction is what it is. That's all. Now, they don't use that title, and they use something that's more probably common in the evangelical world of spiritual mentoring. But all that to say, that was part of it, this having this conversation. So in week 14 of this curriculum, we basically tell our narratives. We tell our story. And the way it's described is the active and gracious presence of God in the story of my life. That's what it's not a I was born and I lived here, and it's not this biographical data as much as how has God been showing up in your life? So again, 8 people sitting in that front room at the Abbey, and we spend all day telling our stories to one another. We give about an hour for each one where they talk and they read their story for about 20, 25 minutes. And then about for another 25 minutes, we sit and have conversation. You can ask questions, but you can't give advice. If you're familiar with the Quaker Clarity Council, it is a very somewhat similar structure to that. As I listen to your story, I'm just trying to see how God is moving. I can ask questions, but I can't give advice. So that's probably more in the weeds of what we do when we show up. We're not spending the night, but we hear a few stories in the morning. Then we kind of leverage the kitchen that you have there and your garden, if the weather permits, and the garden that you have outside and the benches, and we go outside and eat our lunch. And then we come back in and do the afternoon, and we rinse and repeat in the afternoon. But I've also led some silent retreats there that are more typical silent retreat, that you show up in the morning, I give you some structure, you go off and you spend the day 3 or 4 hours by yourself with God, and then you come back together as a group and you discuss, hey, what did we just experience as a group? But anyway, done both of those type
Yeah.
of retreats at the Abbey, and they have served very well for, a group of 8 to 10 people.
So I would imagine that for these people that you're leading, as you described, like they likely know how to do Sunday school. They know how to do a 6 to 8 week Bible study, but this is something new, this hearing stories of paying attention to how God is at work. And what are you seeing as you lead them through that?
And we have 30-year-olds up to 85. My wife and I are leading a group right now, and a really wide range of men and women. And generally the most common thing is, I've never done anything like this before in church. I didn't know that this was available. And probably the biggest thing, Peter, it has to do with intimacy. It's a level of knowing that, as soon as you learn someone's story, it just changes everything. And then as soon as your story is known by others, it's changed by you. And so what Vantage Point 3 likes to say is there's 3 big questions we're trying to answer. Who is God? Who am I? And what is he wanting to do? What is the work that he's wanting to do through me? And so those are the 3 big questions that we are asking. Who's God? Who am I? And what is the work that he wants me to do? You're not doing it off by yourself. You're doing it within community. I think that's one of the biggest takeaways, is the intimacy of the community.
So let's imagine if I was someone in a role like that of being in charge of discipleship or spiritual formation at my church, and I'm hearing you talk about this, thinking, oh, I wish we could create some space in our church for sharing stories. What advice would you want to offer a person like that, or encouragement to make that happen in a church community?
Well, it requires a lot of work on the part of the individual telling the story. You've got to ask the right questions, because if you go in and as a leader, you say, tell me your story, without kind of giving parameters to that, it's very possible you're going to begin some sort of a biographical, this happened and this happened and this happened. And so I do love the way that Vantage Point 3 frames it, is we're looking and we're paying attention to the active and gracious presence of God in the story of our life. And what that comes down to is people, places, and events. Who are the people that help to shape us? And generally they can list that. Here are some key people that have come into my life. What are the key places that have somehow been a part of that? And then typically there is some sort of an event, key events, turning point types events that have happened. This happened and my life was never really the same. And of course, as you and I know, to be able to label those as which one of those were really painful. There can be painful people, there can be painful places, and there can certainly be painful events that take place. And to come to realize where was God within that and to invite them. So all of a sudden, if I'm telling that story, if I'm telling that story of how God showed up within my story, that seems to be very different than what I grew up, maybe you did too, what I grew up with. The youth director would bring the drug addict to come in and say, I used to do drugs and then I found Jesus and I don't do drugs anymore. And that's a great story, but that's not what I'm talking about. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'm hearing you say then that storytelling is really powerful in our experience of God.
It is.
In our spiritual life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
To be heard, to be known, to be seen. These are powerful, transforming things in our life.
Yeah. And to be able to say, this happened to me.
Yes.
And someone else receive that.
Yes.
That's an incredibly powerful thing.
Yes.
Well, and to circle back to your personal experience of the Abbey, what advice or encouragement would you want to give to somebody who thinks, I'd love to do a 3-day silent retreat, but I'm really busy. I don't know how that fits into my schedule, and I don't know what I would do for 3 days if I can't do anything. What would you want to say to a person like that?
Well, don't do it alone. I mean, talk to you. I'm sure that you would be more than happy to, give a structure of some sort. There's plenty of books and such as that, but I just don't think it's the same. Of pulling down a book and how to do a 3-day silent retreat is very much different than talking to someone. And I would really encourage, whether it's talking with you or it's talking with someone else, to process what is going on, kind of almost a before, during, and after, because the retreat, it's not like it's over when you get in the car and you drive home. It certainly lingers with you. And I just think it happens through conversation. So I would almost encourage to talk to someone. I'd love to talk to someone about it. But there's all kinds of good people to talk to about what can I do on it. Because it is true. I mean, there is, as you know, there's a flow between doing and just sitting. And you need a guide. You need a help. You need kind of somebody going up the mountain with you and kind of helping you along the way.
Well, awesome. Thank you for that, Garland. Well, Garland, as we kind of come to a close, I've got a handful of questions that I would love to ask you that are just for fun. So just top of mind. You don't have to think super hard about these. I hope you didn't prepare for them. So what's the last book that you read?
Wow. I just got finished reading Lion Country by Friedrich Buechner. And I now have this is what I do, probably part of my 7. I go all in, and I've read about 3 or 4 books by Friedrich Buechner. He's new to me. I know he's not new to a lot of voices, but man, I really, so Lion Country, it's really good. It's a novel. It was nominated for a National Book of the Year. I didn't know he was nominated for a Pulitzer Prize. That was for one called Godric. You need to read Godric, Peter. I would recommend it. I'm not supposed to be giving advice. It's about 11th century hermit, and it's not that long. And the language, you would love the language. It takes a couple of chapters to get into the rhythm of it. But that's another Friedrich Buechner book that I would highly recommend, particularly for a pastor or somebody that's in the ministry. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, Garland, I know you're retired, but if your job could be anything other than something you've already done before, what would you want it to be?
Well, yeah. Wow. What a great question. It's weird, Peter. After having worked for 40 years, 43 years, whatever it was, I am enjoying I woke up the other morning and told my wife, I have nothing to get accomplished today, and I love it. I have a little bit of a lazy streak in me anyway, so I have a hard time answering that. I don't want to go back to work, Peter.
That's fair enough. That's a valid answer.
I love having conversations with men over a cup of coffee, and you don't have to pay me for it. But if somebody wanted to, I'd be more than happy to do that.
Oh, that's great. If you could travel one place that you've never been before, where would you want to go?
I think I would want to go to France. My last name is Tackett, and it's French, and I've been trying to get in a little bit of my genealogy. They were Huguenots, evidently, that fled persecution from the Catholic Church to England and then came to the United States in the late 1700s. And so there's a part of me that wants. The Tour de France just got finished, and I mean, I'm halfway interested in the bike race, but I really just love the helicopter shots of everything, the old castles and all that kind of stuff. And I feel like what I'd love to do is I don't want to travel. I want to go to some little town and I want to park myself for about 2 weeks and just, drink a bottle of wine and slow down and not, I don't know, that's in my mind. That'd be a great vacation.
What would you say is a comfort food movie for you? In other words, a movie you can just put on 100 times and it never gets old.
Wow, the first one that came to mind is one called Lars and the Real Girl with Ryan Gosling. And I just love that movie. I think it's a picture of the church, and it is creative. You're watching it and you're going, what in the world is this movie? Have you seen it by any chance?
I have. Yeah, it's been a while, but
I just think it's incredibly creative and it's incredible. I don't know. I think it's a great movie. So I'd say Lars and the Real Girl.
All right. What's your favorite place to eat a meal?
I'm a big fan of Charleston's here I don't know what it is about it. I don't know if I think it's the atmosphere. It's kind of dark and the wood panels. The food's very good, but I'm a big fan of Charleston's here. I know it's kind of a chain and everything, but no, I like it. It's always a good meal.
So atmosphere is an important thing for you.
Yeah. Yeah. Have a good conversation. It's not too loud and not in a big hurry. And yeah.
Excellent. If we were going to karaoke, what would be your song?
Man, later in life, I got exposed through my oldest teenage son through Linkin Park. And I'm sorry, there are a couple of Linkin Park songs that are just, I don't know, they just get me singing and moving. And I don't know. So I guess it would probably be a Linkin Park song.
I love it. What would you say makes you laugh the hardest?
I will tell you that my family is very funny. I'm kind of the straight man. I've historically always been a good audience. And I was having coffee with a friend the other day, and there were a couple of us, and someone in the coffee shop knew me, and they walked over and said, well, I knew it was Garland because of his laugh. And so I'm evidently pretty loud. And I know that, but I kind of get into it if somebody's funny. But my wife is exceptionally funny. It's what I attracted. She has this subtle, under the breath kind of she's laying low. It's just, I don't know, it'll catch you off guard. So anyway, my wife is she makes me laugh very.
That's great. She is very funny.
She is.
Yeah. Well, Garland, I am so grateful for you and for the work that you're doing and for the way that God has been encountering you through the Abbey. I just think is wonderful. And thank you so much for being with us today and for sharing some of your story and letting us hear you.
Well, I certainly appreciate it. I appreciate you and the work that you're doing and supporting you in every way I can to try to expose folks in my church and to this weird thing of going off into a house and sitting in a house for a day. But you've been an incredible encouragement to me and certainly a resource to me. And so I hope I really do appreciate you too.
Thank you. And thank you, listeners, too, for taking the time to be with us today. You can learn more about the ministry of the Sabbath Life on our website, thesabbathlife.com, and you can find information there about booking either a personal retreat for yourself or for a group at the Abbey of the Heights. And if you'd like to make a financial gift to support the ministry of the Sabbath Life, you can also do that on our website at thesabbathlife.com/give. We exist because of the generosity of people just like you. And then very last thing, be sure that you're subscribing to this podcast so that you're able to catch the next stories that we share. If you like what you're hearing, please also leave us a review so that others can more easily discover us and help us spread the word about the Abbey of the Heights and a life of rest. So until next time, may you know in the deepest parts of your soul that you are God's beloved. you.